Yeah, I mean it's one of those things. Like I know the game is all about velo right now, but at the same time, not everyone's going to be able to throw whatever that looks like 90 plus, and mixing up some arm angles or trying something new. It can definitely change things for a lot of guys' careers. And as much as the game is going velo, there is always going to be a need for funky guys in the bullpen and messing up the hitter's timing. And like I said, it can definitely change things for a lot of guys' careers for sure.
That was Geoff Freeborn, former professional pitcher in France, Germany, Canada, and the United States, former college coach, host of the Sidearmnation Podcast, and someone who's helping the Irish Wolfhounds find players who would be eligible to play for Ireland in the World Baseball Classic. Hello and welcome to episode 118 of the Irish Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Becker. Freeborn will be my guest on the show today. We're going to talk about a lot of different topics, but we're going to start with how he's helping the Irish Wolfhounds. Thanks for being here, Geoff. Why don't you share what you're doing with the organization?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I guess I kind of connected, I don't know, a few months ago, and just kind of doing some kind of recruiting for them, I guess, trying to find some, players with Irish heritage, North American players. And I've always kind of enjoyed doing that and done that for a few national team programs. And yeah, just trying to help find some players with Irish heritage that could be eligible to play for the Wolfhounds.
So you bring a unique experience because of how much work you do in Canada. And we've had people on the show from the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame, and I do find it interesting. We're sort of trying to continue to see how the game is being grown in Canada because, first of all, there are a lot of Canadians with Irish roots. That's a big thing.
Yep.
But also, it represents a country that is trying to build a baseball program to be at the level of some of these other countries. So, where would you say Canada as a whole is in their development of baseball?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely, baseball's growing in Canada. There's definitely more and more Canadian players playing college baseball in the States, and I think there's more and more Canadians playing professional baseball. Numbers in MLB seem to kind of be growing a little bit too. Not that it's, not a crazy amount, but there's probably about, I think last year there was maybe 20 guys from Canada that kind of played at least one game or so in the bigs. It's growing. There's a lot more academies too. High school programs kind of growing. Seems like obviously like hockey's always going to be kind of the tough sell, right? Like it's definitely a hockey first country, but I think a lot of kids are realizing there's opportunities in baseball too. And I guess the one bad thing about us is we just don't have a pro league per se. Kind of, we're probably one of the only countries to be, that big in baseball, but we don't necessarily have our own pro league. I know they tried in 2003 and it folded halfway through. So the intentions were there. It just wasn't quite maybe we're too spread out, right, for travel per se. But that'd be something nice to see eventually, maybe something like a pro league. But we do have, a bunch of independent pro teams that, in the Frontier League and, Ontario, Quebec, and like the Winnipeg Goldeyes and the American Association. So there is still some pro baseball here, but obviously the Jays are our only team. So a bunch of Jays fans here, but it's growing. Yeah.
So you currently serve as the head coach at the University of Calgary, but as you mentioned, you also help some of these national teams and you're trying to help the Irish Wolfhounds find players who fit the qualifications of playing in the World Baseball Classic and some of these other international tournaments. Do you find that when you're recruiting a player for college, that you're looking for a different set of skills than when you're looking for somebody who is going to fill in one of these national teams. And what I mean by that is, these national teams or teams like the Wolfhounds, a lot of times you have to show up and play with somebody with whom you've never played before. But when you're at a college, you're sort of building more of a team where people practice together every day. Is that a different skill set?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess I was the head coach at the University of Calgary. I guess I stepped down a couple years ago. But I thought, no, I get what you're saying with that question as far as you're kind of building almost for, like a whole season per se, and you have fall ball to kind of see guys, right? And, kind of work on stuff through the fall, winter, and then kind of the spring becomes your season, right? And even in the spring, you've got kind of 3 months to kind of play around with stuff, right? But even just from, my playing days, like I actually used to play for the Great Britain national team. So I definitely I love European baseball. It's always kind of been fun to see the game grow over there. But we were literally, when we showed up to the European Championship, it'd be just obviously maybe from returning tournaments we knew each other, but there was some tournaments where it was just a bunch of new guys for 2 weeks and you never quite knew what you were gonna get, right? And yeah, I guess I put together teams for tournaments too. Like I put together like a team North America at the World Port Tournament in 2019, and yeah, you never quite know what you're gonna get in a tournament setting, right? So really, you're just trying to recruit and fill spaces, and obviously arms is usually the big thing, right? And position players seems to always be easier to kind of fill, I guess, for some reason, right? But arms seem to kind of be the big thing, especially for tournaments. But I don't know. I've always kind of found those are kind of the fun things about tournaments. Is just a group of guys getting together and you get to play, and it's almost like a brand new season for a lot of guys, right? And new start and see what happens.
So we've been doing this podcast for 4.5 years, and at the beginning, I would have edited my question to make me sound smarter, like I knew that you weren't still the coach at Calgary, but
All good.
now I know to just blame John Fitzgerald for giving me the wrong information. So,
Oh, sorry, my bad. No, I
that's fine. I
guess no, I was there for I guess 3-4 seasons there, and just kind of moved on. I guess I'm kind of out in British Columbia now and just need a new change.
Yeah, I'm just teasing John Fitzgerald, founder of the Irish American Baseball Society, for that one. So you are the founder, however, of Sidearmnation, a platform dedicated to supporting sidearm and submarine pitchers. This, to me, is so interesting because I feel like it's so rare to see a submarine pitcher, a sidearm pitcher, make it to the major leagues or even see them in the high minors. But when you do find a submarine or a sidearm pitcher, they tend to be very, very effective. Now, I don't know if that's just because you don't see a lot of them, but what do you think is the importance of developing more sidearm and submarine pitchers?
Yeah, I guess honestly, like you said, like hitters are kind of trained to face overhand pitchers, right? And just that's just what they kind of see in batting practice, right? And just kind of getting used to seeing that a lot, right? And all of a sudden, you see a sidearm submarine pitcher and not quite as comfortable, right? And just a different look, right? And you don't see many guys, especially same side hitters, right, that are comfortable facing that low slot guy. I guess opposite side hitters, a little bit different story, right? But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. Like I know the game is all about velo right now, but at the same time, not everyone's going to be able to throw whatever that looks like 90 plus, and mixing up some arm angles or trying something new. It can definitely change things for a lot of guys' careers. And as much as the game is going velo, there is always going to be a need for funky guys in the bullpen and messing up the hitter's timing. And like I said, it can definitely change things for a lot of guys' careers for sure.
Do you think it might play a part in some of these arm issues that we're seeing and how many pitchers are blowing out their elbows, are needing to get Tommy John surgery, needing to get reconstructive surgery? Do you think that throwing sidearm or more of a submarine style takes a little bit of the pressure off of that part of the body?
I mean, like in a weird way, like your arm is designed to throw underhand, right? Like you can look at college, softball teams, right? And they usually throw the same starting pitcher for like 3 out of the 4 games, right? And your arm is designed to kind of have that underhand movement. I know for myself, I had arm issues, shoulder issues, and when I dropped down in pro ball, it just kind of took those away. And I've heard that before with some guys. It just kind of feels more, I don't know, more loose and whippy. And for some guys, they can actually kind of maybe use their lower half more effectively. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I mean, I'm guilty too, right? You kind of chasing the velo and wanting to throw harder. It's part of it, right? But I do think guys have to be careful. I mean, I don't actually know much about weighted ball stuff too, but I do feel like it is something you got to be careful of and overthrowing but it can be something to alleviate the pressure from your arm for sure. As long as I know it kind of gets a bad rap throwing sidearm, right? I mean, some people you get definitely hear like, oh, it's bad for your elbow. But at the same time, like just throwing a baseball in general isn't the best for your arm. And as long as you're using your legs, it's no worse than throwing over the top, really. And for a lot of guys, it can help their arm and take away some pain. So
Absolutely. We were talking a little earlier about when you're looking at players to play internationally versus players to play on a team. And you've pitched professionally for the Calgary Vipers and the Yuma Scorpions, but you also mentioned that you pitched for Team Great Britain.
yep.
Do you find that when players do get to represent their country, do get to put that flag on their shoulders, that there's a different sense of pride? Did you feel that than when you were playing pro ball, or when you get on the field is baseball baseball?
I mean, it's definitely baseball is baseball, but at the same time, like when you get to represent your country, like I was fortunate enough to represent Canada as well for a few tournaments and junior national team, but then kind of realized that it wasn't necessarily going to make the senior national team right away. So I did kind of jump ship and join Great Britain since my dad was born there. But there is something different as far as just kind of, even the anthem before the game, right? Sure, they're playing the anthem before the game for the Calgary Vipers, but it's a little different when you're actually kind of representing a whole country, right? And even just when I was playing for Great Britain, I was kind of, I guess, in a way, representing all my ancestors from there, and definitely kind of, it's always a special experience because you're kind of facing some of the best players from each country, right? And definitely, yeah, definitely a little bit of a different feeling than pro ball, I'd say, yeah.
And I think you have a really unique experience because you are from Canada and you did pitch with Team Canada for a little bit in some tournaments, but you can kind of relate to a lot of these Irish Wolfhound players who maybe are connected to Ireland through their grandparents or their parents, where you are taking pride in that country because of your ancestors, even though you might not have grown up there. So you can sort of
No.
attest that if people are wondering what kind of dedication people could have to a team when they didn't grow up there, you can say you do feel that vibe. You do feel that connection when you put on the jersey, even if you didn't grow up there, because you do have that strong connection through family.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. And I always kind of enjoyed, even when I was still playing pro ball back in the day and letting guys know about baseball in Europe and, asking guys what their family heritage was. And, I played professionally in France and Germany, so was able to kind of connect some guys with those countries too, and even Great Britain. And yeah, it's just fun to kind of let guys know that there is opportunities out there. And yeah, and I think a lot of guys, it is pretty special to kind of represent your family heritage for sure.
And for those American and Canadian listeners that we have of the show now, what are some of the differences between European baseball and baseball in America or baseball in Canada at both the pro level and the national level?
Yeah, I mean, the pro level definitely just, I mean, it probably is the amount of games, right? Definitely a little bit less, kind of very similar to maybe college baseball, where it's just kind of maybe doubleheader on the weekend, maybe one midweek game. Definitely not as much as like the 6 or 7 games in 6 or 7 days in North America pro ball, right? But in a way, it kind of, I mean, for a lot of guys, it kind of gives them time to travel and see Europe. And, I got, you get to help out with some of the youth programs that are there. And kind of, I mean, that's kind of one of the big things for a lot of guys going over and playing in Europe. If you can kind of help the 11 U's, the 13 U's, 15 U's while you're there. That's kind of part of it too, right? You're kind of helping with the development, whereas probably pro ball in the States or Canada, you just don't have time to, with the season, you're grinding away and you don't really have time to do other stuff, right? So that'd probably be one of the big things for me, was just the travel too, and just getting to see Europe. But yeah, national, like the, European championship wise though, like, yeah, just some of the players I, got to, play against. And I mean, probably for me, like getting to pitch in 2007, like in the finals versus Netherlands to go to the Olympics, like that was a pretty special game. And just, you never quite knew who was going to be there, like a lot of, former big leaguers or current rising stars would just kind of maybe show up at the European Championship. And I just remember like even like Nick Markakis playing for Greece the one year, and Kenley Jansen was catching for Netherlands the one year. So it was just, you never quite knew who was going to show up at the European Championship, but that was kind of the fun part too.
And that sort of gets to the question I had next, which, what is the level of play at these championships? If Ireland is ever to be represented in the World Baseball Classic, what type of teams are they going to have to be able to beat?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think Great Britain's a good example as far as kind of what they've done, with recruiting guys, right? And getting guys from all over, and kind of showing what they were able to do at the World Baseball Classic. Good and bad though, right? Because like and not to talk poorly on Great Britain, but like their domestic league isn't that good though, right? And that's where you see a team like Czech Republic who, really, very locally grown and has a very strong domestic league that just keeps getting stronger and stronger, right? And but yeah, I mean, obviously the World Baseball Classic, especially that, the main pool, I mean, that's almost like Major League Baseball kind of quality, right? And the qualifiers, though, I mean, I think, for something like that, if for Ireland to get some of like, some of the top potential players that they can with Irish heritage, there's no saying that they couldn't qualify after that, right? I mean, no knock against some of the other countries that have been there, but like Argentina in the past, or Pakistan, and some of those other countries, Germany. And I definitely think that there's potential if Ireland is able to get into like say a qualifier in the future, if they get some guys that actually have grandparents born in Ireland, there's potential there to sneak into the main pool for sure.
And then a country like Great Britain, who maybe is using a lot of international born players who have that connection. Once they make it to the World Baseball Classic, then Major League Baseball infuses money into their baseball programs so they can take advantage of making it to the tournament to then build that infrastructure in their home country and hopefully start to develop more homegrown players as well. I think that's where, as countries look to grow, you don't want to cut off the opportunity to bring in people born in other countries, because once you make it, you can really, really start pumping that money into your own programs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even like I said, that team in 2007, it was kind of like, I mean, in 2001, that was my first European Championships with Great Britain, and we were kind of like half British players, half guys like myself. And then obviously, I mean, it kind of sucked. It was kind of a big whirlwind. Like in 2012, they announced that London was going to get the 2012 Olympics, and we were actually in Prague in 2005 at the European Championships, and big celebration, right? Everyone was doing the math, how old they were going to be in 7 years and going to the Olympics, right? But then they kicked baseball to the Olympics 48 hours later. So that was kind of a big, turnaround. But that being said, in 2007, they kind of made a big push, right? Like, okay, like baseball's still in the Olympics in 2008. And we were like 24 guys like myself and only one British player. But then we did make it to the finals and got to play against, Netherlands, and I think we lost like 6-2 to go to the Olympics, right? So kind of a big swing as far as like we'd usually kind of finish 8th or 9th out of 12. And so it's kind of that, but having to do that though kind of started that, growth and even like getting Great Britain an invite into the WBC qualifiers. Some of that was because of maybe that 2007 team, right? Like finishing second, and kind of just kept growing after that, right? And but yeah, I guess, like I said, it's that fine line of making sure you're still developing the local players and local league, and I know they're definitely trying too, and I guess does help that Great Britain does have Bahamas, right? Or some players from there a little bit, right? But I guess at the same time, like the big thing too is like some of those players that play in the World Baseball Classic, though, they're not actually eligible to play in a European Championship too, right? And that kind of changes things a little bit, right? But it's definitely part of it. You look at Spain, I think they won the last European Championship, and very similar. I think they had a lot of guys from Cuba, Venezuela, right? So, I mean, it's nothing new. Teams have been kind of doing that for a long time, right? So just trying to almost keep up with Italy and Netherlands, right? That's kind of been the European baseball powers for 40 plus years. So I think just a lot of countries starting to realize like, hey, if we want to compete with these countries, we got to do something, right?
So, with your help at the time of this conversation that we're having it in real time, you've helped us bring the number of WBC eligible Irish players on the Wolfhounds up to 54. So, you've seen a number of these players. What do you think about the quality of players that you're finding that can help the Wolfhounds out for a game or two? And do you think that with the type of quality team that we are putting together, that they are a team that could theoretically compete in a European championship?
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, that it's going to be fun to see what some of those guys can possibly do, and found some couple pro guys, some college arms, and I guess for definitely from a European Championship standpoint, I think it'd be a very competitive team. Obviously, I think for something like the World Baseball Classic qualifier, if we could get a few more, and that's obviously where hopefully MLB kind of helps out a little bit with that, right? Getting a few more MLB type players with heritage just to be a little more competitive for that tournament. But for the European Championship though, yeah, I think it'd definitely be a competitive team for sure. Yeah.
And when you're looking at players, do you, because of your pitching background, do you focus more on finding arms because that is a big part of this? Or do you consider yourself a pretty good scout for position players as well? But as you mentioned earlier, position players kind of fall from the sky a little more than arms.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely arms, maybe a little bit more, but at the same time, if there's a solid hitter, right, 100%, not a, yeah, we'll definitely take them too, right? But obviously, arms seem to be a little more of a premium, right? But
Awesome. And then I kind of want to talk to you about your professional experience in Calgary and in Yuma. I lived in Arizona for a while. I actually love Yuma, and I thought it was cool that you played for them because I know their ballpark, and I know that um, you're not dealing with a lot of rainouts there. And then also playing for the Calgary Vipers. What were those leagues like, and what was the competition? But also playing in places that weren't used to having professional baseball, maybe got a team for, in Yuma's case, because they could play in the winter. In Calgary's case, you're starting to try to build that game in Canada. What were those two teams like?
yeah, definitely. Calgary was interesting because they used to be a AAA team, actually, like for, a bunch of teams. Mariners was kind of the main one. And when they actually left to Albuquerque. And then there was kind of like a little bit of a gap, I think, for a couple years. And then they brought in the Calgary Vipers to kind of take over, I guess. But just definitely not quite the same fan base as the Cannons. I think a lot of people, with it not being affiliated, right, or maybe it kind of hurts some of the attendance, but at the same time, like it was in the Northern League, which back then was one of the better indie ball leagues. It was kind of classified as like a AA type indie ball league. A lot of former big leaguers and high level AAA guys, and so it was definitely pretty solid baseball, and definitely got kind of thrown in the waters a little bit, but it was fun. And it's just like I said, I got to pitch against a lot of former big leaguers and guys that I kind of grew up seeing. And then they switched over to the Golden League, but that was kind of, yeah, it was interesting because like that, it almost maybe it kind of hurt. Like the Golden League had good intentions, but then, like they started to grow, like it was like Hawaii, Mexico, and like it sounded good, right? But it's almost just like too much travel, right? But some of the players that played in that league, like Hideki Arabu and Young Kim and Jose Lima, and like even Mark Pryor was pitching for Orange County. And yeah, that was kind of like I said, the same thing as like maybe a tournament, but you showed up to a game and you never quite knew who was going to be there, right? And so that part was kind of always kind of fun, and never quite knew who you're going to face, right? And I remember getting to pitch against like Robert Fick, and I remember watching him with the Tigers only like a few years before, right? And just kind of weird stuff like that. And um, Yuma was kind of interesting because I was actually, so I never actually got to, I played in Yuma with Calgary, but like I got to play against Calgary with Yuma. It was only for like a week, but like I was kind of maybe done with baseball and just kind of playing senior men's, but they were short on players. So one of my buddies reached out, and basically just kind of, myself and a few other local guys, we kind of joined Yuma for a week. But like a pretty fun team though. Like Jose Canseco was our player manager, and you know just a interesting week getting to be around him. And he was like whatever, 47, 48, and still launching baseballs. Just couldn't maybe run like he used to, but pretty fun to play for him, for even though it was just a week. But definitely some interesting teams.
So you mentioned getting to play against some of these guys that you saw in the big leagues, and you talked about a lot of pitchers, but do you have any particular memories of facing a batter that you saw in the bigs and you just had to kind of calm yourself down? Or was it just the next batter came up and it didn't matter who it was, you were just going to follow the sheet and do what you have to do?
Yeah, I mean, definitely it helped being, like, obviously as a lefty, I was kind of being used as a lefty specialist. But there was definitely a season there where it just seemed like a lot of the big veteran left-handed batters were former big leaguers, and definitely a few guys. And like, oh, wow, yeah, I definitely remember. You hear the name, right? And, kind of now batting, and like, oh, yeah, I definitely remember this guy, and try not to, like, overthink it per se, just kind of trusting my stuff. Kind of a name for me that stood out was like Stubby Clapp. Like, he's kind of Mr. Canada in a way. Like, he's represented Canada so many times, and I think he's now the first base coach for the St. Louis Cardinals. But just, he was a guy he was on Edmonton when I was in Calgary, and just getting to face him. I think I probably pitched against him 6 or 7 times that season, and getting to strike him out a couple times, and kind of fun just to face a guy like Stubby Clapp, just being from Canada and kind of seeing what he used to do. And his nickname was basically Mr. Canada for a while. But yeah, just definitely try not to necessarily overthrow when I face some of those guys. But the weird thing is sometimes you'd face a guy that was maybe probably just fresh out of college, and that's maybe the guy where you kind of, maybe sometimes I'm guilty, you'd kind of get lazy on a little bit, right? Or you think you could get away with a little bit more, and they would end up kind of maybe taking a double off the wall, whereas a guy that maybe you recognize the name, you're going to maybe go after him a little bit differently, and definitely was guilty of that for sure.
And just one last question, since you mentioned that you were a lefty, I just want to get your thoughts on the fairly recent Major League rules about reliever use and sort of getting rid of that one batter left-handed specialist. What do you think about that rule?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like the loogie, right? Like, there was like the common, like, that left-handed one-out guy, right? And you'd see guys like Mike Myers back in the day that would just come in and get a lefty. And I guess I kind of did that for a couple years with the Vipers. And maybe I was lucky if it was like a lefty-righty-lefty, I get to face, 3 batters, right? But there'd be times where I'd just come in and get one lefty, and that was it. And honestly, like, that would be my dream job in the bigs, just to come in and get like David Ortiz and sit down after that. But at the same time, I don't mind, to maybe face 3 guys. It kind of maybe, I guess maybe hopefully it gives, not necessarily pigeonholed per se, right? It kind of maybe forces you to, work on your stuff a little bit more to get those righties out and show that you can get righties out as well. And because I know definitely some lefties in the past would just get pigeonholed of, you can only get lefties out, and that's going to be your future, right? So I can see good and bad to both. Maybe from a time standpoint, there was a period there where maybe it can kind of just speed up the game a little bit. It could get a little bit slow with some of those lefty, righty pitching changes, right? So I get some of it.
Geoff Freeborn, thank you so much for joining us on the Irish Baseball Podcast. It was a blast having you here.
No, appreciate you having me. Thank you.
This interview was one that we made available to paying members of the Irish American Baseball Society in video form on the Community Network for a few weeks before it was available on the podcast. It's just another reason to make sure that your membership is up to date. I'm your host, Rick Becker, and this has been episode 118 of the Irish Baseball Podcast.